Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Eloise. Today we're going to talk about the perfume house Thameen London. So I was first introduced to Thameen London when there was that hype over Peregrina and then all of those polarizing reviews over their other fragrance called Blue Heart. I have since tested a good number of their fragrances, and I own Peregrina, I own Blue Heart, and I also own Bravi, which is part of their Britolone collection. And my understanding is that the word Britolone is a combination of the word British and cologne, and the fragrances in the Britolone collection are called cologne elixirs. So today we have 8. I have 5 testers and 3 full bottles that we're going to talk about. So let's dive in. So first up is Bravi, which I spoke about in my video on tuberose fragrances. Oh, this is so intoxicating. Bravi opens up with a citrusy zing from citrus notes, and there's ginger, and you get the tuberose, but it's not a green, screechy, heady tuberose. So you have this citrus, gingery element to it. And as it starts to dry down, you get some sweetness that comes from the honey and the vanilla. There's a denseness to the fragrance. It's definitely not a linear fragrance. The honey and the vanilla are not overly sweet. I feel like the honey adds a little bit of a syrupy component to the fragrance. There's a little denseness. That tuberose is in the background. Without being overly floral, you have saffron and tobacco in here, which I think are grounding notes that keep the tuberose from turning the fragrance into an overly floral, screechy fragrance. It's so pretty and blended so well. It's creamy. It's probably coming from the walnut milk accord in here. And in terms of performance, I think it's fantastic. It's a long-lasting fragrance. I can smell it on myself through the entire day, and it lasts on my skin about 8 hours. And I really enjoy smelling it on myself. It's a very creamy, enveloping tuberose fragrance. And I do have a full bottle of this, and the bottle is great. It's this really pretty frosted glass, heavy cube with a nice cap that's magnetic. I love the magnetic caps. Yeah, so this is Thameen's Bravi. I'm really enjoying this. If you like the idea of a tuberose fragrance that's not overly floral and too green, that has saffron, tobacco as grounding notes, that's creamy, that's a little sweet and a little dense from the honey, you should really check this out. Thameen's Bravi. So the next one is called Patalia. So Patalia I considered blind buying and then decided to order a sample instead. Patalia opens up with a burst of sweet florals. I do get the rose in here. It's a little aldehydic. It's a little citrusy at the outset, and then it gets a little dark. I think there's patchouli in here. It's a little musky. And I read a lot of reviews where this has been compared to MFK's Baccarat Rouge 540, which I own. And I have to agree, there are differences. It's obviously not exactly the same as Baccarat Rouge, but there are a lot of similarities. I would say that this might be a more light-hearted, less serious version of Baccarat Rouge. So as this settles down, it gets ambery, it's musky. I get the rose, but it's a dirtied rose. There's patchouli in here, and I think that that dirties the rose up a little bit, which I kind of like. And while it's similar to that Baccarat Rouge DNA, I would say that it's not as sweet as Baccarat. Baccarat has that burnt caramel sweetness to it. This is a little darker and a little muskier. Baccarat comes off as a little denser, but it does have a lot of similarities. So if you enjoy MFK's Baccarat Rouge and you're interested in maybe something that's a little lighter, maybe a little more lighthearted, I would say try this. It's very pretty. It is playful, feminine, a little sweet, a little floral. It's not serious. It's like the younger sister of MFK's Baccarat Rouge 540. Yeah, so that's Patalia by Thameen London. So the next one is very popular and has gotten a lot of hype, and that is Thameen's Peregrina. So Peregrina is described as a rose fragrance. I actually featured it in my rose video, but I realized now that I tried Peacock Throne from Thameen that I would say that fragrance is a true rose fragrance. That's a rose patchouli. And so I would say that Peregrina is a rose fragrance that's blended with other white florals in such a way that you can't quite pick out the floral notes in the fragrance. And it is interesting, there's rose damask in here, there's lily of the valley, gardenia, and jasmine. I'm not a fan of lily of the valley, and gardenia is a little tough for me as well, and yet it works so well in this fragrance. As this dries down, it becomes a sweet, ambery, floral fragrance, and what peeks through is the rose. I do get the ylang ylang in here, which provides a creaminess to the fragrance and a little bit of sweetness. There's also myrrh, there's amber, and there's also a powder accord, which is very, very obvious to me. This dries down to a very pretty floral fragrance that's slightly sweet and powdery. Now, I am personally a big fan of powdery fragrances, and I really do love the way Peregrina dries down. I think the dry down is actually where the magic happens in this fragrance. I find the longevity to be excellent. It's not a hugely projecting fragrance, for me at least, but I do feel that I can smell it on myself throughout the day. I get a good 8 hours, and a lot of these Thameen fragrances, from my experience, I find very long lasting. It is feminine and it's pretty. I feel like Peregrina is femininity in a bottle for me. And I do have the full bottle, and this is in the blue bottle, again with the magnetic cap. I like the little cube and the gold writing. It's simple, classy, and it looks really pretty in my perfume collection. And I really enjoy the fragrance itself, of course. So Peregrina from Thameen London. So next up is Royal Sapphire. And I am liking this fragrance because I could not put my finger on what this reminded me of. I don't have a spray version of the sample, unfortunately, which I'm not really a big fan of, and I have some on my left wrist as well. So Royal Sapphire opens with this burst of citrus. There's bergamot and mandarin as top notes in here. And there's jasmine and orange blossom that then start to peek through. And as this dries down and the jasmine develops and comes through those citrus notes, this fragrance reminds me so much of Memo Paris' Flamme. This is strikingly similar to Flamme by Memo Paris. As this dries down even more, you have the ambery notes at the base, there's patchouli, and it keeps the fragrance from turning into a full-on floral jasmine fragrance. It seems creamy. I'm not sure exactly where that's coming from. Maybe from the orange blossom. But it is a little woody. There's moss at the base to sort of cut through the floral component of the jasmine. You have the patchouli, you have the moss, and you have the woody ambery notes. This really reminds me so much of Flamme by Memo Paris. I own a full bottle of Flamme, and unfortunately, as much as I love that fragrance, it is not long lasting, and I use it mostly as a bedtime scent for myself. And I am considering a full bottle of Royal Sapphire, only because I really like Flamme, and I'm thinking that this is the longer lasting version. But Royal Sapphire is very pretty. You have to like jasmine and orange blossom to like this fragrance. I'm not gonna lie. You have to be a fan of that sort of fragrance to enjoy this and to appreciate this. So all in all, Royal Sapphire is a clean, creamy jasmine fragrance that's ambery and woody all at the same time. And it's actually kind of cozy and it's clean at the same time. I think this would make a very nice everyday summer fragrance. Yeah, so that's Thameen's Royal Sapphire. Next up is another fragrance that I find quite interesting. This is Peacock Throne. I have it on my right wrist, but I'm going to add a little more so we can talk about it. And I have it on the test strip as well. So Peacock Throne is a rose patchouli fragrance. It opens up citrusy, a little spicy, and then a dark rose comes through. It's really dark. I know there are two types of rose in here. There's Taif rose and there's also Turkish rose. So what does this smell like? So unfortunately, Peacock Throne for me is not the kind of rose that I enjoy. Rose is a little tricky for me, and I found rose fragrances that I enjoy, like Elikay's Lettre de Pushkar. I just got Matière Premier's Radical Rose, which I think is beautiful. So Peacock Throne, unfortunately, is not my type of rose fragrance. The rose is too musty. That's the best way that I could describe it. It's just too musty. It's a little too vintagey, in my opinion. And I read some reviews that compare this to Tom Ford's Black Orchid, and some reviewers even said that this is the more wearable Black Orchid. So I ran over to a local perfume shop, and I have Black Orchid here. I had tested it many times before, but wanted to remind myself because I saw so many people make the comparison, and I just don't see it. Black Orchid is sexy, dark, intoxicating, bold. It's a very, very sexy, dark fragrance. Peacock Throne, on the other hand, unfortunately, to my nose, it's a little bit of an old-fashioned, sort of vintagey rose scent profile. It's just not the take on rose that I enjoy. So that's Thameen's Peacock Throne. So the next one is called Bold as Love, which is also part of the Cologne Elixir collection. And I have it here on the test strip. So this is another one that definitely would not work for me. It opens with this very, very like zingy, ultra citrusy lemon note. There's something about it that's like this clean, aromatic fragrance that reminds me of an aftershave. And I think that comes from the other notes in this fragrance. It includes juniper berry, and there's lavender in here, geranium. There's smoky leather, patchouli, and vetiver in the base. I tested this all the way to the dry down, and I just don't detect leather or anything patchouli-like in the fragrance. To me, this is citrus from the beginning to the end, and it's aromatic, so it's a citrus aromatic fragrance. It would not work for me, but that's not to say that those that like citrus aromatic fragrances wouldn't enjoy this. Again, these cologne elixirs from Thameen have great longevity, and even the projection is quite good, I would say. Yeah, so that's Bold as Love from Thameen. So the next one is the third one in this series from the Britalone Cologne Elixir collection, and this is called Chords. I had high hopes for this fragrance, and unfortunately, this one did not work for me. So Chords is basically a honeyed neroli fragrance that has leather and tobacco. And a lot of people described this as masculine leaning, and because of the tobacco and the leather note in here, I was a little on the fence. I almost blind bought this, and I'm glad that I got a sample. It's a nice fragrance, but you have to like orange flower to like this fragrance. And I do find it a little bit of a strange contrast, the way the orange flower sits against the tobacco and the leather in here. While you get the smokiness from the tobacco and you get that leather accord, you also have this like soapy, honeyed, almost licorice-like orange blossom. It comes off like licorice to my nose, and I had to look up the notes, and there's no licorice in here. But there is honey, and I think it's a high dose of honey. So what you have here at the opening is neroli, orange flower, and bergamot. So it's this bright citrus floral fragrance that's almost soapy and clean. And then comes in tobacco and the leather, and I guess the honey. And it's a blonde tobacco, so it's not dark, deep, and dense. And then I think the ylang-ylang and the honey accord creep in, and you get this like syrupy sweetness, this orange flower with this syrupy sweetness that again comes off like licorice. And then you have this tobacco leather in the background, which I thought would make the fragrance a little darker, denser, and deeper, but it really doesn't do that. So what this is essentially is an orange flower fragrance with leather accords and tobacco in the background that's very, very syrupy in consistency. There's a denseness with respect to the sweetness in the fragrance. So it's this like soapy orange flower that's dense and syrupy, and then there's leather and tobacco and that smokiness in the background. And when it dries down, you get whiffs of the orange flower, and it really projects. The fragrance is long lasting, and I was getting whiffs of it. It's a highly projecting fragrance and long lasting, I will say that. And it's pretty, it's just unfortunately orange flower. The way it comes off in this fragrance, it's really not something that I see adding to my collection. So that is Chords from the Brit Alone collection of Thameen London. So funny story, I ran out of battery and had to unplug and charge. And I ran down to the lobby because my package of Francesca Bianchi, The Dark Side, arrived. And I got in the elevator with two people, a man and a woman. And the man said, "Who smells so good?" And I proceeded to apologize for the 5, 4, 7, or 8 fragrances that I have on me at the moment. And he said, "It smells amazing." And I apologized to him and to the woman, and then she said, "No, it really does smell good." And I really, to be honest, I had nothing to say because I'm not sure which of these 6 or 7 fragrances they were even complimenting. But apparently the combination of these Thameen London fragrances were very pleasing to some neighbors in my elevator. And last but not least might be my favorite of the 3 that I own from this house, and that is Blue Heart. I love this. I really like Blue Heart. I'm gonna make use of the last I have of this sample. So Blue Heart was very polarizing, I think, and people were either loving it or hating it. And people were describing this as a coconut, like a saffron coconut fragrance. I have to be honest, I absolutely cannot find a coconut note in this fragrance. So to me, this opens up as a creamy, slightly sweet, irisy leather fragrance, the leather component coming from the saffron. So here the saffron is creating this very, very soft, delicate leather. And with that is a little bit of sweetness that comes from vanilla and the tonka. And it's also earthy and ambery and a little musky. And it dries down to my nose. It dries down to a leather fragrance that has a little bit of sweetness and creaminess to it. I would go so far as to say that Blue Heart is the wrong name for this. I think we need to rename this. This is the cousin of a fragrance that I just unboxed and added to my collection, and that is Queer Velour from Naomi Goodsir. Is it the most complex fragrance? No, but I do think that it's done so well, so refined, it's so classy. The leather is not a dark, rough leather. Rather, imagine a very, very delicate, buttery, soft, light tan, almost yellowish, high-end leather glove that feels like butter. That is what this dries down to. The powdery component comes from the orris fruit, and it's not overly sweet. So overall, I think this makes a perfect signature scent. I personally enjoy wearing it to the office. The longevity is wonderful. It's not a hugely projecting fragrance. I don't think that it's the type of fragrance that's meant to be hugely projecting and in your face. I really like it. I think it's so sophisticated. So that's Blue Heart by Thameen London. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my video about these fragrances from the House of Thameen London. Until next time, bye guys.